Administrative order on consent in 2017, we have had DENCA install equipment and reduce chloroprene emissions by over 85%. And we are proud of that at this time, although there may be more work to be done. I want to say it is the mission of DEQ to protect human health and environment in Louisiana, and we will continue to work to reduce emissions to the lowest feasible levels that we can do. And with that, once again, I want to thank our federal partners. I want to thank this community for having us here today, and I want to thank Governor Edwards for letting me come down here and talk to y'all. Thank you very much. Wait. Oh, got to introduce. Sorry about that. Next, we're going to introduce Dr. Beverly White, who's the executive. Who is the executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice.
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, or is it still before afternoon? I am Dr. Beverly White, the Executive Director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice in New Orleans, Louisiana, and this is truly a historic day. I have been working in the corridor and in New Orleans, Louisiana for 30 years. And when I first began my work, there's one incident that I will never forget. And that was one of our communities going to court to fight illnesses, or to fight the company that caused them to be sick with cancer and other illnesses based on a particular pollutant. We lost that case. And after we lost the case, the community person said to me, "How did we lose? We're sick. We know that these toxins are in our system, but I don't understand how we lost." As the years went on, we recognized clearly why we lost, and that is because that community was sick not because of one pollutant that caused only certain types of diseases. They were sick because they were exposed to multiple pollutants, and those multiple pollutants caused rare cancers, and science had not caught up with that. So we have been asking for better protection, better science for years. When Administrator Regan came through with his Journey to Justice event, it was important to us that he met the people, smelled the air, understood the problems with the water and the soil. And when he left here, he's promised that he was going to come back and try to find a way to better the quality of life. That is what this rule means to us. More importantly, the rule also means that during hurricanes, which of course we know because of climate change are more severe and more often, that there will be no exceptions that start up or shut down for these chemicals being out of compliance. So I just want to thank the administrator for keeping his promise. This is the first time anyone has kept their promise, from LDEQ, by the way, to now, that where the community voices were heard, community solutions were put at the forefront of the work that he's trying to do to make life better for those of us who live in Louisiana and in the corridor. And by the way, Louisiana has some of the highest cancer rates in the nation. Of the top 10 cancers, Louisiana is number 1 in 7 of those cancers. So don't believe the hype. We have a lot of pollution here. We have been poisoned and we are sick. And we're finally being able to address some of the multiple chemicals that are poisoning us at the same time, causing rare and different cancers. Thank you. And now I'd like to present to you a very important person in this struggle, Mr. Robert Taylor, who's president of Concerned Citizens of St. John Parish.
Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a little overwhelmed because after spending my life here, spending the last 7 years in this heated struggle with these petrochemical industries, in particular the one that we are dealing with right here, our group and I has been in a pitched fight with this plant and the effects, the terrible effects that it's having on our people. As Dr. Wright mentioned, the cancer rates are unbelievable. And the fact that we know now that there has been a level set of chloroprene that's acceptable, we know now that our children, by the time they are 2 years old, have experienced that 70-year level. A level of 70 years. The pollution is so terrible on our children, on our whole community, that by the time our infants are 2 years old, they have reached that 70-year level. So it means so much to me that we now have someone and some agencies and parts of the government that not only heard our cry, they came to our defense. In November of 21, when we had the historical visit by the EPA, the man actually walked the streets, knocked on doors. He got to meet people. He made his commitment to us here in St. John Parish and in the river areas. And he's living up to that commitment by what we see here today and what has transpired since then. So that I don't get to rambling like I normally do, because there's so much that I need to say and to express to the people, and especially to those groups that have supported us in this fight. I want to thank them. But to our new administrator, I don't have the words, and I'm watching his actions, and I hope all of us continue to be vigilant in our work to save our communities from these irresponsible people that are acting in such a way that is so harmful to our communities. So before I go to rambling too long, I want to introduce to you the guy that's driving all of this. With his willingness, is showing us that he's there for the people. That's what we need. That's the one thing that's over this 6-year fight that we've missed here in this parish, was somebody, if we could please warmly welcome our administrator, Mr. Michael Regan. Please, Michael. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning. So I want to thank Mr. Robert Taylor first and foremost for not only that introduction, but his bold leadership for his community. And I also want to thank you for continuing to welcome us back. We really appreciate it. Dr. Wright, thank you for being here today as well. And thank you not only for your leadership here locally, but your national and international leadership protecting frontline communities. I also want to thank both of you for your work to advance community-driven solutions that place equity at the center of environmental protection. We would not be here today without your advocacy. We're also grateful to have with us Acting Secretary for the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, Mr. Roger Jingles. Thank you for joining us and representing the governor. And a very special thank you to my good friend, Congressman Troy Carter. Thank you for having us in your district. I have to say that this district could not have a better representative in Washington, D.C., and so I am so grateful for his partnership. I'll never forget my first trip to St. John, the Baptist Parish, back in November of 2021, during the first leg of my Journey to Justice tour. I distinctly remember standing on the grounds of a school that was a stone's throw away from a facility that manufactures toxic chemicals. The children who attend that school, who study at that school, who eat lunch at that school every single day, look just like my son Matthew. During that same visit, I met with families all across this community. And nearly every person that I spoke with knew someone who suffered from an illness that they believed was connected to the pollution in the air they breathe. I was able to see firsthand the generational and widespread effects pollution can have on so many of our families. And it was that first leg of the Journey to Justice tour that really cemented my agency's commitment to environmental justice. Not just for me, but for the many staff who have worked on these issues for years, but have never seen the impacts of their work on real people. When you visit a place like St. John's the Baptist Parish, you don't just simply look away. Before I ended that visit, I vowed that EPA would take action in response to the alarming conditions we saw while here on the ground. I pledged to prioritize the health and safety of this community and other communities like this that have been historically overburdened by pollution. After all, that's what Journey to Justice is all about: listening to the people on the ground and working together to tackle the persistent inequities that exist in our country. And that's exactly what we have done at EPA. EPA has taken numerous actions to reduce harmful pollution that I saw on my Journey to Justice tour. And just last month, EPA and the United States Department of Justice filed a legal action to address an endangerment to public health in this very community. But folks, our work isn't done. And that's why I'm proud to announce today that EPA is building on our commitment and proposing a regulation that would reduce more than 6,000 tons of highly toxic chemicals each and every year, slashing the emissions of highly toxic chemicals like chloroprene and ethylene oxide, also known as ETO. When finalized, this regulation will drastically reduce the risk of cancer caused by exposure to ETO and chloroprene, especially in states like Louisiana and Texas, where the vast majority of these facilities are located. The proposed rule would also cut the emissions of nearly 80 additional air toxic pollutants from plants that make synthetic and organic chemicals in other parts of the country. And to ensure that some of the most significant air toxics stay below levels of concern where our people live, EPA is proposing to require those plants monitor this pollution at their fence lines. We're using every tool we have, highly innovative tools, to equip communities with the best available information about the impacts these proposed reductions will have on their specific communities. EPA's first-of-a-kind community risk assessment determined that our proposed rule for synthetic organic chemical manufacturers would dramatically reduce the number of people with elevated cancer risks from breathing air toxics. And in communities near these chemical plants, the number of people with elevated risk would drop by an astounding 96%. Folks, today's announcement is undoubtedly a game changer, especially for our children who are among the most vulnerable groups at risk from exposure. You see, this is personal for me. As a parent of a 9-year-old, I can say with certainty that there is no higher priority for me than protecting the children of this country. From day one, President Biden and this administration have committed to fighting for communities just like this one, and today's action only solidifies that commitment. I'll never forget my first time visiting the parish. It's an experience that has been ingrained in my memory and one that I reflect on quite often. And that's why we'll never stop fighting for all people in this country, no matter the color of their skin, the money in their pocket, or the community that they live in, because everyone in this country deserves clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and the opportunity to live a healthy life. Everyone, thank you. Well, I'll say that we as an agency moved immediately, and we took actions. The first actions after I departed, we put inspectors on the ground, and we did some real tests, and we required some long-term fence line monitoring. So we're already seeing some responses. The actions that the United States EPA and DOJ have taken are now being heard by court. I hesitate to predict what a judge in a court will do, but I can assure you that we see the sense of urgency. And so even though we have proposed a rule that we believe will be instrumental in saving lives and protecting families, EPA is using every single tool in our toolbox to protect this community from now until we get this rule finalized.
And it's important to note, just while we're waiting on that rule, doesn't mean that EPA will not be, as the administrator just said, they're on the ground. And these actions with the tools that they have are being utilized. Remember, even in the absence of the rule, there are tools that have not been used to their fullest.
Finalize this rule, hopefully by next spring. So when you talk about permanency, it's one thing for us or for this administration to take enforcement actions, which we will continue to do. The rule signifies that permanency. All of our states across this country have delegated authority to execute on the law and the law as it stands. And so I have no reason to believe that Texas, Louisiana, Ohio, West Virginia, all of by EPA, we will step in and we will ensure that the people in all of these communities across the country are protected. Well, I think you've heard from the community it's a concern. And I think when we think about addressing startup shutdown and malfunction, when we think about how toxic these chemicals are, communities don't stop breathing during a hurricane. They don't stop breathing during an event. So it's the company's responsibility to control this pollution, and it's our responsibility to enforce those laws, and we're going to do just that. You know, there could be a range of consequences. As I said, this is a very, and we'll have to govern ourselves accordingly based on the incident. Well, I think that I don't want to comment on ongoing either enforcement actions in particular or the Title VI filing that has been filed by community members. What I can say is EPA takes its responsibility to investigate all of these petitions and accusations very seriously, and we're spending our time doing so. Yes, I think it's really simple. We're going to set very stringent levels, and instead of being out in communities with air monitors trying to determine what level of exposure these families may be experiencing, we're going to force these communities to pay themselves for the monitoring that they're going to put on their own fence lines to ensure that the pollution never leaves the facility. That's the goal, and that's what the aim of this proposal is. And when proposal will stop that pollution at the fence line and preserve the air quality and the quality of life for these communities that have been overburdened by pollution for far too long.
Thank you all.
Excellent. Thank you, brother. Yeah, man. Yeah. The one thing I want to get in there is what you and I believe. That's why they can coexist. Yeah, that's